All right, we're getting live. We're going live. If you see us today, if you see us right now, then all things are working. But I am going to go really quickly through to make sure that those of you who are watching through YouTube Live, or if you're watching through Periscope, that things are working well for you too. All right. And that seems to be going well. And okay. All right. Here we are, folks. It's another fantastic week and it's Halloween. And I don't mean to scare you, but we have a fantastic show ahead. Welcome to Association Chat, your weekly online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with the topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and I want to give a shout out to our wonderful sponsor, Fontiva. It's the AMS for innovation. I want to thank them for their ongoing support of Association Chat and the community here. If you're on Crowdcast, you can click the little call to action button and check out Fontiva. It's the little green button at the bottom. Go check out their blog for the association community. And if you're listening to this later on iTunes, or you're listening on Google Play or Stitcher or any place that you happen to run across this lovely show, you can just visit fontiva.com and check out their blog there. So for this episode of Association Chat, we are talking about an issue that has economists worried and higher ed and association executives scrambling. There's a skills gap in the American economy that leaves millions of jobs unfilled because qualified employees can't be found. This is not a Halloween story made up to scare you, but a challenge and an opportunity that association leaders have been talking about for decades. And now it's hit a critical point. Now, today we have three guests who are going to share with us their own experience in addressing this skills gap. This is all about what will we do for work. And we're talking with associations and association partners. Today we have Patrick Haller. He's the Director of Membership and Member Services for the National Business Aviation Association. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. We have Joseph Valerio. He is the Director of Workforce Development for the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association, also known as AVIXA. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you for being here. Happy to be here.
Yes. And Heather Wetzler. She is the co-founder of Q Career. It's a lifelong learning platform aggregating the resources from associations into a single location. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's morning here still. I'm in LA, so.
Welcome to the show. Yes, morning, noon, afternoon. I drink coffee all day, so it just really doesn't matter to me. So yeah, welcome to the show. This is a super heady topic because people get on edge when we get to areas that are sort of gray areas where we don't have a lot of answers. But we know that there's a lot on the line. And I want to start out by addressing our two association executives on the show today. I want to talk to you guys right away about the skills gap need and to validate and verify what all of us are reading and hearing about in the news. You know, is this something that's blown up? Is this something that's an issue? How bad is the skills gap problem today? And how is it affecting your industries? I want to start with you, Joseph. Would you like to take on this question first?
Happy to. And okay. I think the best phrase that I can use is something that we've heard from a number of our members for several years now, but in particular last year. And we're finding that the number one sort of, I would say, barrier to our future in our industry is exposure and connection to the future of those students. So I would say that the biggest barrier we're facing right now is access to qualified people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what do you think about that, Patrick? Is this similar to what you've been seeing?
A little bit. We are unique in that business aviation is a niche. Within aviation itself, we compete with the airlines for talent. And so when the younger generation begins their job search or begins planning their career path, many times the end result of that is a job with an airline. And they don't even consider jobs with smaller companies that serve different needs in the same field, aviation. And so part of our job as the trade association is to make them aware that jobs even exist. And once they learn about the industry that we serve, they are interested in learning more about opportunities. But I agree, awareness is a big issue for a lot of our member companies in our association.
Mm-hmm. Awareness is an issue. And over here, Bob asks, can you describe qualified? When you guys are talking about qualified, what do you mean?
I'm happy to field that first, if that's all right. In particular, with AVIXA's membership, we represent a group of audiovisual experts and designers and people that perform integrated experience with outcomes all over the world, helping people communicate, whether that be live events or in a conference room and things like that. And so what by qualified they mean is people that are coming onto the job or coming into an interview in particular, and they already have some of those fundamental skills that they typically may train someone to do later within their first 90 days or a year, but they're never quite certain that they're going to stick around or that they'll even sort of manifest themselves as an employee. So we're finding a lot of people are actually letting people go because they're not qualified in that regard. And sometimes even, I would argue, overqualified, because our students in this country in particular have been pushed to four-year schools. So they may come out a full-on engineer. But for audiovisual, sometimes you need someone who's going to be willing to climb an event and pull down some cable and pull some speaker wire through and things like that. And they're actually sort of overqualified in that regard because they don't have those fundamental skills that a lot of the trades are still looking for at this time.
Wow. And I hear about that in all kinds of different industries. Bob says examples of skills. I think you kind of gave a few of them. What are some examples of skills, maybe, Patrick, for in your industry?
So it runs the spectrum because there are so many specialized functions within aviation. Pilot credentials are very objective. They are highly regulated in terms of the type of aircraft you can fly if you're talking about a pilot or things of that nature. But beyond that, outside of the scope of just flying, you have a whole industry of folks that serve that need. So that includes mechanics, it includes linemen that help refuel an aircraft, it includes customer service workers on the front line that can help find someone to book a hotel or order catering for an airplane. And all of those skill sets are things that people don't necessarily think belong in aviation. Aviation is just learning how to fly. And that's absolutely not true.
So this is a great segue, I think, to why associations are being approached for specifically to address this skills gap issue. It is something that I've seen people talk about when it comes to the subject of credentialing and micro credentials and digital badging and things like that over the years. And yet it's not enough, right? Having some of those things in place it's not solving the situation. And so, Heather, when I was introduced to you and what Q Career was all about, I was intrigued because one of the things that your organization does, your business does, is it's all about introducing associations and what associations can do without necessarily calling it an associate. I mean, you're introducing all of the great stuff that associations do to students, when they need it the most, right? Mm-hmm. So can you tell me a little bit about what Q Career is doing and how it's addressing this problem?
Sure. So we're just starting out. So we started out with 5 associations and we beta tested our platform to students. And based on that, we're redesigning our site and we'll be relaunching actually next week in the more or less full feature mode, and associations will be able to start uploading their information then. But what we're trying to do is help students So we consider ourselves a lifelong learning platform, but our first phase is really career exploration and career readiness for students. And what that means, it's both high school and college students. And before we could address the skills gap, what we noticed is that there's an exposure gap. So students are often only exposed to typical career domains, lawyer, teacher, doctor, and then whatever their parents do for a living. And if they're a first generation college student, perhaps, or just, they're in high school and they're not sure if they're going to go to college, their pathway for careers is much narrower. So we want to aggregate the resources from professional associations and get that in front of students so that students know the resources that are available to them, in terms of internships, mentorships, and then, like you mentioned, badging and micro-credentialing. So, and there's a couple of different ways to go about that, but we figured that getting it in front of students first, would be the main way to start helping associations fill their funnel for the future generation of membership.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that a little bit more because, I want to go into some of those challenges that associations are facing and a little bit about some of the different ways that they've been going about trying to find a solution for this because the fact remains, we have this skills gap. We are trying desperately to find the right kind of people to either train or to put into those positions that they may not even know that they exist. And even though it's the information age, we have all kinds of ways to find this information out. It's not happening. So help me out here. Anyone who wants to step in, talk to me about why this isn't working now. What's getting in the way?
I could start. I think it's, associations are having a harder time reaching the younger generation. So, and when I went to high school and college, my schools introduced me to professional associations. That's not really the case anymore. And the professional associations have a lot of competition out there. So for events and networking, they compete with the meetups. They're not apples to apples because meetup is just someone that has interest. It isn't necessarily someone that's a professional in that career or has experience or could even help you. It's just someone who's interested in something. So associations have to start getting out in front of those younger kids to really showcase their benefits. And I think that's why, it's those amazing resources are going untapped.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
I would add to that relevance is a big issue even within our trade association. Membership and belonging to an association typically had meant access to a number of benefits that by themselves aren't all that interesting or sexy to have. And young folks want to be excited about the industry that they're working in. They don't necessarily want just access to a static list of benefits. They want the opportunity to interact with people in a different way. They're not looking for the same type of events as our typical 55-year-old average member might be. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it means creating new products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I see that. Joseph, what are your thoughts?
We actually at AVIXA, I think have followed suit of what Patrick's saying because we've noticed this through our membership and we can sort of try to see the forest through the trees. We naturally, strategically, in the last several years have planned out an actual rebrand, which made us AVIXA recently. So number one, we didn't originally, as InfoComm International, if anyone knew us, had association even in our name. And so we realized, number one, that needs to get back in there because, as Patrick sort of alluded there just now, the importance of that to just the history of America and what that means to be a young person and belong to an association like that in that community was very important for us to reinstate in our name. And then to represent how at least our industry is changing. I can't speak for the aviation industry, but audiovisual has always typically been sort of a backdoor trade where people kind of do sound somewhere and they find the job, or they meet somebody and they find a job. Number one, there's never really been an academic portal or an academic causeway to the industry itself necessarily. There's always parallel trades like broadcast and things like theater and audio and video as well, sort of separately, but there's never truly been, as Heather sort of mentioned before, like the exposure gap is missing there for us. And so I think one way we're doing that is, number one, in this lovely rebrand we've done, to try and have an awareness campaign so that your younger people who are now more interested in causes and less in sort of membership, as Patrick stated, that they sort of feel like they belong to something that's bigger than themselves. And,
right.
And so we're doing a lot more there by trying to build more awareness and doing a full-on campaign as necessary.
See, I love that. And I actually want to hear a little bit more about that too, because, you know, my history way back in the day, I worked with a couple of different associations where my responsibility was to communicate to the student members, to build student chapters. We had scholarships. We had all kinds of fantastic networking opportunities where they could meet. I mean, I'm talking about the best minds in science that had to do with, physicists who were winning huge awards and wonderful opportunities. And yet getting that awareness out there, if you didn't have faculty at a university somewhere, if you didn't have, you know, people planted, organizations planted to share your information, to share that awareness, nobody found out, right? And there were times when we had scholarships that we didn't have enough people applying for them, giving money away, giving things away, and you couldn't get enough applicants. And I think that it was a remarkable loss of opportunity. But the fact is that opportunity is there, and there are people who want that. But it's spreading that awareness. It's getting that knowledge out. So, you know, that's why I think that this is such a compelling problem. I see the skills gap as you can see this with associations all across the board. I saw it when I was working with a scientific professional association, and I hear the same things from association professionals today. So, you know, when you're going about trying to increase that awareness and address that, what are some things that you've been trying so far? What's been actually getting you a little bit of traction?
I think the biggest thing to consider, forgive the vernacular, is that if one builds it doesn't mean people will come. I think our association sphere and our not-for-profit, honestly, the sector has sort of assumed that for many, many years. And so I think, at least in our association's case, we're thinking about new ways to go where those young people are. And what better way to do that than empower our members to do that, number one. So developing resources and tools, partnering with organizations like Heather's, in fact, who will be able to reach the people where they are, as opposed to us trying to go out and find them. And so number one, we're finding some recent success by reaching out to other nonprofits or other trade associations that represent entire group of people that we ourselves would love to bring in as customers, so to speak. So that would be something I would certainly urge other associations to do, is reach out to partner organizations or become partners with organizations that already have all that stuff on the plate for themselves. So they'll do the work for you, essentially.
Yeah, I love the idea of partnership. You see that working. I mean, so often nothing that we do can just exist in its own little bubble. So, you know, how do you feel about that? What are you seeing that is working or maybe not working, Patrick?
So in our field, we're still really working within kind of the traditional channels, partnering with universities that have an aviation program to expose them to membership, for one, and also to expose them to our events. We host an enormous trade show either annually in Las Vegas or in Orlando, and we work with aviation schools from the high school to the college level to bring as many students as they can to the last day of our events. And to see some of these young folks walk around our show floor and to understand the depth of opportunity that's available to them is pretty inspiring. And then once you have them in the door, to involve them in a program that is relevant to them. So not so much for the high school student, but for someone out of college. We've started a young professionals program that provides networking and is beginning to provide a mentor and mentee relationship with someone in our field. And I know that those all sound like very traditional paths of awareness and engagement within an industry, but it's something that we haven't really had a whole lot of experience.
You know, it's interesting because I was looking at, I was actually just recently in a conversation just earlier today where I was talking a little bit about this issue with trying to reach out to prospective student members and increasing student membership and some of the things that worked and didn't work. And it's funny, when I look back, I think about some of the dramatic impact that sort of taking a more customized individual approach to developing opportunities, it had this huge impact for those individuals who were a part of it. And the problem was what? Right? It doesn't scale, but if you take on this, sort of hand holding, creating these customized experiences, it can have an amazing effect. Heather, can you talk a little bit about what Q Career is doing, where you've seen, the ability to maybe, grow these opportunities and so that it does scale, and maybe address the idea of creating a customized approach too?
Sure. So for us, because we're a dual marketplace, right? So we're trying to attract both the associations and the students. So we've been partnering with companies that already have inroads at colleges, community colleges, and high school. So that way we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and then we'll slowly start branding ourselves to students. And then we have student interns and acting as campus ambassadors. And, I think, as far as scale, you just always really have to get creative. We attend so many different events, and we're close to San Diego, obviously. So when I went to a Cal SAE event down in San Diego, there was a lot of nonprofits there dealing with Navy pilots, actually. So these Navy pilots get out, they've, served their time, they kind of, can retire at 45, some of them, depending on what time, when they went in. And then it's kind of like, wow, what do I do with my life now, really, right? And where do I fit in, but for something like maybe business aviation, partnering with different, veterans groups, because there are probably a bunch of pilots out there that, you wouldn't think would need jobs, but, they kind of get out of their service. They've been doing something for so long and they have to go that route. And then we were at the Milken Institute, and it was a diversity summit talking basically about diversity in the workforce. But a executive from Santa Monica College was on the panel, and he was talking about, companies are now approaching them. And Santa Monica College, just so you know, it's a 2-year school, but it's a huge feeder school into the UCLA system. So UCLA accepts all the Santa Monica credits. It's a really nice transition. So you could pay for 2 years, at Santa Monica College, and then you could transfer into the, the UC system most of the time. And Amazon came to Santa Monica College, and Amazon is actually teaching a cloud computing class at Santa Monica College. And sometimes it's also getting businesses over the hump of always putting on the resume, we need 4-year degrees, right? Because here's a perfect example of kids that, are being trained just in cloud computing and are getting a certificate in that basically Amazon set up the entire program. So they actually obviously know how to work with Amazon products. But some employers, though, too, still get hung up on you must have a 4-year degree, and I think that really needs to be looked at too, because there are kids that have the experience and the certificates and the knowledge, but it's not a 4-year degree. So I think too, there's, we have to also go back and relook at, what we're really asking for sometimes.
It is such an interesting time for work. It's so interesting because, while we're talking about the skills gap, we're also facing the AI questions of, what jobs are going to remain for those workers that we have out there right now. And something you were talking about, all of these people they're going through, they're getting trained for a certain thing, and are they just going to not work when they turn 45 or whatever? A lot of us are looking at, changing careers, maybe, talking about, it's not even looking for those students who have never gotten into the workforce, but it's talking about, and pretty soon when we're having to retrain and refocus and pivot in our own lives and move into a new career. So let's talk a little bit about that. How are, and I want to go to Jonathan and Patrick I called you Jonathan, Joseph and Patrick, and talk a little bit about that. Are you guys thinking about that when you look at skills gap? Are you thinking about the AI question or retraining people as they change in their careers?
Well, I can kick off a little bit. In our industry, one of the elements that is changing in technology is unmanned. And what does the unmanned aviation bring to our trade and our industry? And how do things change? Because people generally think of business aviation as a corporate jet flying executives different places, but business aviation spans a lot of different industries. There are oil and gas pipeline companies that have used aviation to inspect their lines, power companies that do the same, air ambulance services, local municipalities that use helicopters throughout the day. And so as technology changes and the skills change, how do we bring that into the fold? Because today, MBA has existed for 70 years without unmanned aviation being a component. So how do you begin to offer benefits and services that meet that need? Because someone will fill that gap. As technology improves and new technologies enter into the workforce, and maybe there aren't as many pilots in a cockpit of an aircraft, or as many mechanics working on an airplane, because the airplane it's 5 pounds and it's almost disposable if something breaks on it. How does that change our industry? So yes, it's a big issue that we are confronting by learning about the technologies that exist, offering services that.
I love this because let me tell you, we have a great comment over here on this side. Those of you who are watching through Facebook Live or Periscope, or if you're watching on YouTube Live, maybe you're listening to this later. One of the great benefits of doing this chat every week and doing it on Crowdcast is that we have some wonderful comments that come in. People are able to participate through the Crowdcast platform live. And one of the questions that we got earlier came from Bob. I'm not going to say his whole name. I'm going to try to get him to jump on and maybe talk with us a little bit. He writes about the impact of automation on human employment. And he talked about the 4 essential skills to maintain, being the ability for self-directed learning, collaboration techniques, analysis, and creativity. So Bob Resselman, what I might do is I might take one of you guys out of your window for a second and then bring you back. Are you all okay with that? Absolutely. Do you feel comfortable? All right. Let me bring Bob in. I love this. So Bob, let me go ahead and invite you on. And this is going to be interesting to see if I can get you invited on screen. Yes. I've invited you on, and hopefully this will all work. This makes every AV person, by the way, Joseph, very nervous. But it is. I have to live with the uncertainty every week, and so here we go. I get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
While Bob's trying to figure out how to do that a little bit too, I'll talk about the AI stuff. Yeah. That's why we started looking at Q Career as a lifelong learning platform, because whether you want to or not, the majority of us are going to have to pivot, in our careers because of AI. And, that's scary for a lot of people, because what if someone wasn't good at school, right? Or purposely didn't go to a 4-year college because that school wasn't their thing. And now we're saying like, oh, you're going to have to, get retrained in X, Y, and Z. So I think that's where associations really play such a huge part, because they're made up of employees and employers. They see this stuff coming down the pike, and they can kind of start to get their members a little bit more comfortable with it and start getting them thinking about, hey, like we're going to start offering like these courses or these badges next. And, and easing them into it, I think, too. There's a psychological component to it as well.
I love that. Bob Resselman, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Please excuse my informal, not attire. Makeup was...
Well, you didn't know I was going to invite you on here today.
No, not at all. Thank you.
So Bob, you had some interesting comments over here in the chat box, and I wanted to bring you on because you seem like you're really well informed about this topic. Can you join in the discussion a little bit about the skills gap and what you're seeing?
Not the skills gaps, it's the cultural gap. Let me give you an example. I was visiting my granddaughter this weekend. She's 14 years old, and she goes to school in Des Moines, Iowa. And I asked her. And she's a very advanced student. I'm not bragging, but she is. I'm 14 years old, programming. She's taking calculus, programming in Python. She's all the way. She's right there. She doesn't need, frankly, anything. They'll chase her because her cognitive skills are so high. But I asked her a question when we were having breakfast. I said, "Do you know anybody? Do you have any friends that have trouble reading? Do you have any friends that just have trouble reading or have trouble adding numbers?" And she said, "No, I don't." And I thought back to my being 14 years old. And when I was 14 years old, now granted, I grew up in a different area. I grew up in New York, but I hung out in the playground and I played basketball. And one of the things I did when I played basketball is I hung out with kids that had trouble reading and had trouble adding up numbers. And they were part of my social circle. So that meant that the reason it's important is that they rubbed off on me and I rubbed off on them. Now what's happened, because we've structured social interaction among adolescents a really great deal. You hear about kid exhaustion, that we've actually separated people according to their cognitive abilities. And it's saddening. Now, on the other hand, though, is I've been looking around at tech programs, voluntary tech programs in LA, and there is some attempt, but the educational models haven't changed to adapt to current technology. So when there are a lot of programs, and I'm talking at the middle school, secondary level, are still coming in with the sage on the stage. It's called the sage on the stage as opposed to the guide on the side. So when we start thinking about jobs and employment in the future, this notion of cultural separation really sort of is there, for lack of a better.
Yeah,
so that's my immediate comment.
I think that's a fascinating thought. Is that so? Is it enough that we're addressing this quote unquote skills gap when there is a cultural gap as well? And what does that mean when we're looking at the way that we're trying to meet these needs that we have in the workforce today?
Right. Well, and then there's the next question of what do we talk about 5 years or 10 years out? automation is real. I'm still researching it a great deal. I do think that a general AI, which is what we want, not specific AI. Specific AI is the bot that comes on and asks you if you want to buy sneakers. General AI is the person that says, okay, now I'm going to go out and I'm going to, whatever, I'm going to write a soundtrack for this movie. And I have to know why. Mm-hmm. I think what's going to happen is we'll see more pronouncement in general AI, and I can send you some people are working on it a great deal. The notion of employment is going to change. Right now, short term, we're still seeing a lot of warehouse work coming up. We are still seeing a lot of fine motor skill work having to be done. The replacement, as far as driverless vehicles, there's cars are getting a lot of attention, but they're secondary. The two ones you want to look at as far as artificial intelligence and transportation is interstate trucking and also container shipping on the seas. So, and the other thing is, and the other one is an energy. So, for example, there's a chart running around energy, gas, petroleum has always been what's called a high RPE industry, revenue per employee. It only takes 18 workers to man an oil rig. And oil rigs are terribly productive in terms of income. Now with AI, they're reducing the number, so you can get it down to 6. So we're seeing a lot of automation in energy. Once all those solar panels are laid in, there's not a lot of work after that because getting the grid in is going to be one, but maintaining it after that. So then we're seeing 2 levels of AI. One is what we call human enhancement, where the robot or the piece of artificial intelligence will be your friend and it will work with you. So you don't have to drive the forklift anymore. You might have to do what we call edge case exception work. But then when we're talking 20 years out, then things get interesting. Do we know what those new pieces of employment will look like in 20 years? Some of it we do, but most of it, some of it we don't. Most of it we do.
Right. What I love is going back to your 4 essential skills to maintain. You talk about the ability for self-directed learning, collaboration techniques, analysis, and creativity. That ability for self-directed learning. And then I look at, when I'm back to what we're here talking about today, I look at where associations come into a lot of this and supplying that learning, supplying that ability to change and learn and adapt. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about, so as we're looking, whether it is talking about today's skills gap problem, and then the cultural gap, and then AI and automation coming in and needing to quickly figure out, what am I going to do for work next? What does this mean for our industry? How do we adapt quickly? So when we are talking to students coming in or people who are mid-career and needing to figure out what's the next thing that I do, what are some of the ways that, we can guide people through addressing this problem? Because, we're talking about the associations that are supplying the learning. We talked about like with what Heather and Q Career is doing with supplying a way to find that and connecting, making those connections. What about the individuals themselves? I mean, what do you say, Bob?
What I say, first of all, I think that I have an interesting statistic to share with Heather, but I did an article about micro certifications for a DevOps agenda, talking about the relationship between associations, micro-certification, and professional proficiency. And there's huge, it was one of the highest rated articles written. So there's huge interest in that. There's people.
Where is this? I'm sorry. Where is this located?
I'll put the link. It's on DevOps Agenda, which is a magazine.
Gotcha.
It's a magazine, an online magazine. So everybody is getting that micro-certification counts. As a matter of fact, I'm being micro-certified right now in Hyperledger, which is a cryptocurrency technology. It's the essential cryptocurrency technology, blockchain. So that stuff does count. And the reason I got certified in this, because I predicted, it's going to be a need in the future. So for the Linux Foundation offers a certification. Again, there's another one. Linux Foundation offers the class for free, but the certification costs $90 or $99. Mm-hmm. So, and that's going to be important. Blockchain technology is going to be important. People should pay attention to it. So going back to what association says, there really has to be a value proposition. There's two things. What's the value proposition? And I'm sorry, the gentleman over here to the left of me, I forgot his name.
Joseph.
All right. So it's Joseph. I referred to him as Jonathan earlier.
AV guy. AV guy, yeah. So what becomes interesting, it's interesting I can do that and it works.
I know, he's down here to me. But yeah.
What becomes interesting is, what's the value proposition that we can offer the learner? And the first one is obviously AV. AV is not going to go away. And the other interesting thing is AV is going to be one of the industries that still requires real-time interaction. It's going to be very hard to have robots crawl through ducts efficiently for the next 10 years.
Right.
So there's real work in there. But what the Linux Foundation has been very good about is they know how to go out and find the people and offer them something in the way that's meaningful to them. So with regard to associations, it's really what's the value proposition, and then how do we make that known, and then also then it goes back to the third one, which is curriculum. How do we design our curriculum that's meaningful? So what that looks like concretely would be, the only one that comes to mind is the new techniques in instrument teaching, all right, whereas you've always gone to a piano teacher once a week for an hour, and that becomes your human tactile interaction point, and you're expected to practice another 20 hours before the next visit. So there's the curriculum has been designed between human interaction and also self-directed learning, which is what we call piano practicing, self-directed learning, and then also honing creativity, piano practicing, analysis, piano practicing, and then collaboration, playing in the orchestra. And that's really where the hot spots are. And sadly, people can't draw that dot, that there really is value in doing those sort of artistic collaboration activities that we let go. So going back to the association, what becomes interesting then is how does an association like the United States, the beef packers, how do they offer that sort of curriculum in a way that's meaningful and valuable?
I love this. Okay, so very interesting. I need to go ahead and bring Patrick back but Bob, thank you. And if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
I'm WrestleBob, RESELBOB on Twitter. And it's WrestleBob@gmail.com. And if you do that, and then also, Kiki, what I can do is, if you like, I can send you a copy of my bibliography if you want to move it around.
Please do. I would love to post a follow-up blog post about this. Thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you for the time, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my thinking.
You got it. Love it. All right. Bye, Bob. This was fantastic. So, so excited to have Bob on. And now I'm going to try to bring Patrick back on. It's this back and forth. I don't know. What were your thoughts? I mean, hearing Bob talk a lot about, the fact that there are still those skills that are going to be needed. There are still those industries that are going to need the people to do it. But I think the piece that he commented on right there at the end that I just, my ears perked up and I thought associations, that collaboration piece, right?
I totally agree. I think especially because students in school, you get almost penalized for collaborating, right? It's all about the individual, obviously you're not sharing tests. So we're really, and it's almost, and it's become a soft skill. And someone really has to teach this generation about collaboration, and schools do not do that. If anything, they penalize them for it.
Can I take this in just sort of a different direction just for a second? Because I always like to have an opportunity to challenge people to maybe collaborate with me a little bit and think in some different directions. But here's the deal. So we're talking about this issue with the changing workplace, this workforce need that just is not being met. And we just spoke about the collaboration piece. And I agree. My daughter's going through school right now. The collaboration piece is severely lacking. A lot of times they get their hands slapped if they're working together too much. And so let's talk a little bit about where associations fit in there, because certainly in the entrepreneurial space, we look at startups, we look at these incubators that are, we pull people together. The idea is innovation is going to happen if we have all of these different smart people together, working together to solve problems and build businesses. Is that something that associations you think should, look at as maybe they are the hosts of those incubators? Maybe they're the ones who bring these different groups together, and that's part of the learning. That's part of the experience. That's part of that career development that they're offering. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm happy to kick that off.
Okay.
In particular, at AVIXA, we consider ourselves the hub of information and knowledge in our industry. And so the way we try to maintain that and to stay ahead of the future, as Bob alluded to moments ago, was by leveraging our actual membership, by bringing together our membership in our board of directors, letting them guide us into the future that they see as important and how they want to, in this case, get more people employed. We do so also in our certification, our micro-credentialing, our curriculum. We bring together those groups of people that do the jobs every day and can recommend how we can better reach people because they're looking for certain skills and how to better make job descriptions more available, et cetera. And so by leveraging our actual membership, the people that are getting that most benefit, we hope, from that value proposition, we can therefore then find more people that can see themselves doing those jobs as well. And so again, like by having a good board of directors and planning strategically with them throughout your campaigns and throughout your funding, whatever it may be, or events that you throw and partnerships with other associations, by having them be empowered, we are therefore, I think, empowered as well. And so we at AVIXA, at least, we want to be that hub. So we do whatever we can, whether it's trade shows throughout the world, because I should mention we are truly an international organization. So we also kind of have a unique wrinkle to maybe what others in the United States do, in the sense that we have 11 trade shows all over the world yearly. So we have to host the minds and the diversity of minds all over the world in our industry, because we're a very, very large industry. So we have to maintain being that hub by bringing them all together at these different events, having DACOMs to better do curriculum in ways that are more formatted to asynchronous learning, and you can name it just down the board, I'm sure.
I love that. I'm thinking a lot about what you said. The fact that you have this global perspective, are you seeing, we haven't really spoken about, we've been very US centric in our discussion today. We haven't spoken about any skills gaps and Bob would appreciate culture gaps that are existing in some of these other countries too. Is that something that you're seeing, just quickly before we move on from that subject, is that something you're seeing worldwide? Is that something that is more US centric?
I definitely see it. I should say, see it worldwide, Kiki, because number one, I think in particular for our industry, what we're facing mostly is a commoditization happening in the technology and in the services provided with audiovisual stuff. So the need there is to find people, because they're trading employees, essentially. They're stealing from each other worldwide. Where we see it outside the United States is the issue is working and partnering with governments, because they may be more in charge of things based on their culture that they have, well, based on what how the government sees itself involved in people's lives. Trade associations in this case may be different in the different parts of the globe and mean different things to people. And so I think we've had to face that challenge, is going around the world and trying to have that value proposition mean a lot to different cultures too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for addressing that, because it's something that, I realize a lot of times Association Chat is very focused on US centric issues. And but I see this as something that I hear discussed on a global scale. But I definitely am very focused on the US most of the time. So I wanted to see what you thought about that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
An example for viewers and listeners would be, we have a massive trade show coming up in Amsterdam in February called Integrated Systems Europe. That's like 75,000 participants from all over Europe, wow. Asia. They come from everywhere. So what we have to do there is we bring people together under the banner and with our partner organizations that host that, and listen to them and ask them, wow, what are your knowledge gaps? What are your culture gaps? And part of it is, we found the success recently is partnering with their governments, their guilds, however they host training and apprenticeships in those countries, and actually give them curriculum, or work with our foundation to provide resources for them and actually partner with their schools. And so physically building programs from the ground up has seen some recent success for us.
Wow. Thank you so much. Patrick, when we were talking about looking toward the future and where the industry is headed, you had made reference earlier to the fact that there is, a serious consideration going into automated piloting and things like that. And so as your organization is looking at, maybe innovative ways of leading people in the future and dealing with the skills that need to be created. Are you starting to, do you have some things that you're developing now, or have you developed some things that are, more directly addressing some of those issues? And if so, what are those?
So I can't really speak yet to the suite of benefits related to that, but I can talk a little in more general terms. I think one of the things that, there were two words that kind of stuck out from that conversation that you were just having. Diversity and inclusion, and this concept of empowerment. And those are two terms that we find are hugely important to the next marketplace. People want to come into a workforce and make an immediate impact. And you cannot do that in an old structure where decisions come from the top. We've learned here recently that empowering younger professionals in the decision-making process helps with both innovation in creating new ideas, and with retention of those employees, because as they gain their skills and they are empowered to make decisions, they're more likely to stay in. So a lot of it's not just about those hard skills, about the technology training, but it's also about bringing in some of those softer skills about how do you communicate with people, how do you interact with people, how do ideas flow from the lower ranks to the top and back down.
That's so interesting. This is actually this conversation, a lot of times the chats that we have on here, the conversations stick with me for a while, but I think this one is definitely one that I'm going to be mulling over for some time. I mean, I'm going back to thinking about like Bob's granddaughter and but is she an outlier, and is it more of a situation where what about the kids today? Are they learning to learn? If we have to be adaptable at being able to drive ourselves to learn new things all the time, are they going to feel that? And how do we know? And so I have so many questions. What I want to do is move us into talking about looking forward. So all of you guys are always thinking about ways that you're going to make progress. And Heather, I want to talk to you about the future for Q Career. So there's work that you're doing right now. There's work that you're moving toward. Can you talk to me a little bit about where you are now and what you see is happening in the future for Q Career?
Sure. So we're onboarding associations now, both professional and trade associations. And we're marketing that information to high school and college students. But moving forward, again, we really see it as a lifelong learning platform and marketing it to adults, because adults are all going to have to pivot at some point in their careers because of automation. And I think the other nice thing too about, something that Bob said is that always learning mentality. And like, he's taking a class right now for, cryptocurrency, right? I mean, I think too, sometimes the associations could be very siloed, and adding certificates from other associations can also advance your career. For example, if I was an architect and I graduated architect school and I wanted to stand out from my other architects, maybe I'd go to one of the solar associations and take a photovoltaic class, right? So then I'm also marketing myself to my future clients as, yes, I'm this great architect, but I also know this, about solar, which, a lot of clients would be interested in too. So I really see associations too could collaborate together and cross-pollinate with some certificates for them that would make sense, for adults who are going to, because we're all going to be, in January of this year, in January 2017, The Economist dedicated their whole issue to lifelong learning, and that adults are always going to have to be learning. And again, I think it's a tougher pill for a lot of people to swallow, but it's going to be a fact of life. So where do they go to learn? Not everyone's a coder. You're not going to go to, General Assembly or Galvanize and learn to code if that's not where your mentality is, right? So it's going to be looking for those courses that make sense for yourself.
I'm just curious, what are each one of you working on developing a skill or learning something or taking a class right now? I'd be curious to find out from each one of you. Okay, so you're already nodding your head, so you have to answer, Joseph. Okay, so what are you taking right now? What are you learning?
Well, I'm actually gaining a graduate certificate in nonprofit management. So my school, my company is very, very beneficial there as far as handing out those opportunities to us. So I'm taking a class right now on social entrepreneurship. And so what that means is to have a nonprofit or for-profit company with social impact. And so I'm trying to bring that back to the table here at AVIXA too.
I love it. Okay. What about you, Patrick?
So I'm working to finish my CAE, certified.
Oh, yes.
Because I have the formal training. I hold an MBA. I hold a master's degree in addition to that. So kind of bringing credentialing to my resume as well.
Heather, what about you?
I'm always thinking about coding, but I'm going to start with WordPress. So I just went to this WordPress camp, and now there's an organization at San Francisco called Girls in Tech. And I'm going to be taking a WordPress, 6-week-long course with them.
All right. I just toggled my mic. Yeah. Oh, that's what about you, Kiki? I am always taking something new. And so I was going to try to take Python and to learn Python. And I started down that path and I'm like, nope, not right now. And so no, what I'm going through and doing right now is I'm actually, believe it or not, even though I get hired to do this and I stay on top of it, I'm actually going through and taking a course through Coursera on it's a social media certification, just to make sure that I have I'm just up to speed on everything that is happening. It's really more the business of it that I'm interested in rather than the how to do on the channels, because that piece I play with all the time, but it's the business part of it that I'm more interested in. Bob says he's working with interactive real-time coding technology that allow us to hang out around code in real time. Cloud9. Oh my gosh, I need to learn so much more. And the cryptocurrency thing is something that is weighing heavily on my mind. Blockchain is huge and I need to understand it. And so I do feel like I need to go and get up to speed on that as quickly as possible. When I start having conversations about it at the bus stop, when I'm dropping my daughter off in the morning, that's a sign. Like I need to actually get up to speed on what's happening. So, okay, guys, and Bob says he has an article on it. I love it. Thank you, Bob. Bob, you are such a resource. So, what are 3 immediate takeaways? We've talked about a lot today, guys, and thank you so much for being here. But I want to offer everybody some takeaways that our panel today can give to all of you who are watching, so that you can start using them tomorrow to make a real difference in the way you address your skills gap or maybe culture gaps for your industries. And just shoot if you have any to offer.
Well, I'll start with my 3. Kind of circling back where we began our conversation on how we involve younger folks. I think exposure is key. Getting folks excited early, whether that's high school or college or in a job transition, about prospects in an industry that they may not be aware of. And so getting your opportunities in front of people that might not have otherwise seen them. The second one, back to our earlier conversation, is involving young professionals in decision-making. Understanding their need to feel like they're contributing to the overall mission of the organization. And that weighs in a little bit there on the culture gap a little bit. I think generationally, there's an expectation that you're going to come into a new position and contribute right away. You're not looking to pay your dues, so to speak. And then the third and final thing I'll say on that is to understand what their reward system is. We find as we talk to our member companies that salaries aren't where they need to be in order to attract the best candidates. And so don't underestimate compensation structures that people are looking for. People will move towards jobs if they feel like they're fair.
All right. Thank you so much. And Joseph or Heather? Yeah.
We always have great things to say from the AV professionals, I think. The first one being is to sort of piggyback on Patrick's talk of using young professionals. More than anything, I think it's important to include them in your membership so that they can make those decisions. So leverage those young professionals in your own organization and your own, in our case, our industry, to help make directions for the association. So in our case, we have a Young Professionals Council. It's a committee of young professionals with a mission, and whether it's mentoring or giving back, or in this case, awareness, let them tell you what you should be doing as an organization and how you can help them in return. I would say the second thing is, once you have that information, make it an effort to make it a part of your strategic plan. Don't ignore it, because that's, I think, where associations can go aloof, where we can forget that we are a member organization. And if we don't listen to them, we're going to miss the mark as well. And then I would say the third thing is, in our case, and probably even in Patrick's case, is go to the schools. If it's not the association, empower your members to go directly to the schools. The most recent success we've had in the last year, through our strategic planning, through our rebranding, above it all, for me, which I'm most proud, is that we've actually built partnerships and built curriculum programs now from the ground up at colleges, tech schools, and high schools in the United States, in Bogota, Colombia, in Mexico. So by actually going out, making through your membership, and for the most part, leveraging your members again to make those connections at that university. And they can say, sure, you're going to give us curriculum, or you're going to support us with industry advisory, but they love it. All they want is, their goal is, and their mission is to help their students get good jobs. It's the same for us. So let's work together to do that.
I love it. Thank you. And Heather?
I'll give 3 different ones. So one I would say for parents, is to start exposing your kids to careers early. There's a lot of new startups out there that do career shadowing. I think that's really important, and they're never too young, 13, 14 years old, get them to start doing some job shadowing to really get their minds thinking in terms of what's going to be out there in the future. Personally, I would give the advice to people to always be learning, start taking, classes or courses and certificates here and there. And not only will it help you if you work for an association, or work wherever professionally, but, for people who are doing certificates, you get to see what the pain points are as an adult learner, right? Is it time management? So I think it's really important to know if you're in charge of certification, sorry, I can't speak today, or badging, like what the pain points are for adult learners. And, the third one I would say for associations is, trying to scale and reach younger members is, fish where the fish are. Start structuring, with both Patrick and Joseph's organizations are doing this really well, where, structure meetup type events for younger people that they're going to be interested in and make it like a project where they're going to collaborate, because not only is that skill important, but the millennials and Gen Z love to collaborate with one another. So if you do programs around that, not only they'll show up, but they'll want to be more involved.
I love it. My gosh, you guys, wealth of information for all of you. What do you think? I mean, come on. What a fantastic chat this was today. Thank you for joining us on Association Chat. As a reminder, you can always catch each week's live episode as an audio podcast on Fridays. It's on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all the places where you love to get your podcasts. Next week's live chat is talking with Carol Vernon about the best ways to prepare as a leader for ending your 2017 on a high note and starting 2018 so that you'll succeed all year long. And we're going to be talking with her about some of her best techniques for ways to approach the new year. So until next time, everyone, I don't know about you. I'm going to keep asking questions so that I can learn every day, because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So you have a great week, everybody. See you soon. Bye.